This is a machine, my machine. This is my local machine. But what happens if I need to get a more powerful machine, but very powerful? I mean very, very powerful. Or what happens if I want to try a different version of my operating system? Or even an entirely different operating system? What happens if I want to try Windows 10, which I actually have, but let's just say that I don't have Windows 10, and I want to try Windows 10 without compromising my local machine? What can I do? Well, there are virtual machines. And of course, when you say virtual machine, you may think about some kind of virtualization software that you install on your computer, and then you get the ISO file and install the entire operating system and install everything that you need in that operating system, and it can take a while. Fortunately, Microsoft Azure provides virtual machines as well. One of its many services of Azure is precisely virtual machines. And virtual machines don't only work if you need to test Windows 10 or suddenly want to run Ubuntu on your Windows computer. Virtual machines are particularly useful, at least talking about Microsoft Azure, when you really need power and you need it now. So, for example, let's say that I need a computer that is running Windows Server and that has SQL Server installed, but I really need it now, and I need it to have a ton of RAM and a ton of different cores and a very powerful processor, and to be available to me in 30 minutes. You would say that's impossible. The installation itself can take more than 30 minutes, the installation of the operating system itself. And not to mention the installation of SQL Server and the entire configuration, and not to mention where the hell am I going to get 800 gigs of RAM right now. Well, if you have Microsoft Azure, you can actually do that. So let's go ahead and navigate to our Microsoft Azure portal and click the new button, the famous new powerful button. And in here, we can select Compute, Virtual Machine, and let's create one from the gallery. Now, Azure Virtual Machine Gallery is quite a big gallery. And even though Azure is a Microsoft product, there are other products that are not precisely from Microsoft. Of course, you have Windows Server, and you have SharePoint, and you have SQL Server, but you also have Ubuntu, and you have CoreOS, and you have SUSE, and you have Oracle, and you would say that those are not Microsoft, those are Microsoft's competitors, and you can actually create a virtual machine running their software right from Microsoft Azure. This is just beautiful. Beautiful. But as beautiful as it is, what I'm going to do is create a SQL Server virtual machine, or a virtual machine with SQL Server installed, and let's go ahead and do that. So once I selected SQL Server from the options on the left, I have a list of very different templates for my virtual machine. For example, this one has SQL Server 2014 Enterprise optimized for data warehousing workloads, and it's running on Windows Server 2012 R2. And just like that, I have, for example, SQL Server 2014 Ready to Manufacture Standard in the same operating system, and I can go ahead and even find some SQL Server running on Windows Server 2008. So there are a lot of templates that you can find in here. Even one with SQL Server 2016. Wow, there are a lot of templates in here. Right now, I'm just going to create a SQL Server 2014 ready to manufacture enterprise running on Windows Server 2012 R2. Now to create it, you just need to click OK in here, or the little arrow in there. But before you do that, I would like you to go and click on the Learn More About Pricing information, because these virtual machines are going to be expensive. Now, it depends on what you call expensive, but the particular one that I'm going to create now is going to be expensive. Of course, you can create something with Visual Studio and running on Windows 8, for example, and that may not be quite expensive. It's still going to demand some credit or some money from your credit card associated to your Azure account. Anyway, I will just create that instance. Which one was it? This one. And the first thing that you need to do, of course, in this case, for the version, I can select which version I want to use. I'm just going to select the newest. And you need to set a name for your virtual machine. In this case, I'm going to use the same name that I've been using. And it's too long. And it's still too long. And that one appears to be okay. And the next thing that you can set or select is the tier. Now, the main difference between basic and standard is that in standard you have way more options. Options were more powerful. Now, you may notice that basic and standard have some instances or some sizes that are very, very similar. For example, the A1 to the A4. The main difference between basic and standard is really the flexibility. While the basic will give a common user everything that he or she needs, the standard tier is going to allow a power user to change more things. It's more flexible. So right now I'm just going to select standard, and I'm going to try to select this V11, which has 2 cores and 14 gigs of memory. Now you could go crazy and select a G5 with 32 cores and 448 gigs of RAM, unless your subscription doesn't allow you to. For example, my subscription only allows me to have up to 10 cores in all my virtual machines, and if I remember correctly, I've already used about 6 to 8 cores. So I'm just going to select this D11 with 2 cores and 14 gigs of RAM, which is still going to be quite powerful. Now the next thing that you have to set, and please remember your credentials, is a username and a password for you to access your virtual machine. And once you have set your username and found a password, because the password requires a number and requires a capital letter, and it has some restrictions just to be more secure. But once you have that, you can click on the right pointing arrow, and in here you can select a cloud service from which you want, or in which you want to create your virtual machine. Now, if you remember, in the past lectures we said that there are 2 types of cloud services. One cloud service that we talked about and that we created with a web role and everything, and a cloud service in which we can add virtual machines. This is that kind of cloud service. Now in here I can of course select one of the cloud services that I already have, but in case you don't have one, you can just create a brand new cloud service. The cloud service requires a DNS name, and it's just going to set it to the same name as your virtual machine. You may want to add your virtual machine to a region or an affinity group or a virtual network. Right now I'm just going to set it to be on a particular region. Affinity groups and virtual networks are for when you want to set certain communication between your virtual machines. In this case, I just want my virtual machine to be alone on the AWS. And okay, the next thing that you have to do is set a storage account. And in here, I can only set to use an automatically generated storage account. And I will not set an availability set. Of course, you can add more endpoints. For example, if you need your virtual machine to have FTP, you can set it right from here. If you want to send some email, you can set the specific protocols right from here. So you can add some endpoints right from the configuration, and of course you can always add them later. I'm just going to set remote desktop. Of course, is necessary for you to remote desktop to your virtual machine, but I'm just going to set it the way it is and click the arrow. And in here you can add some other configurations. You may want to add Microsoft anti-malware or a particular protection for your virtual machine. I am not going to do that. I'm just going to click on finished with that little tick, and it's going to try and create my virtual machine. Now this usually takes between 5 up to 30 minutes, but believe me, is way faster than creating it on premises. Imagine downloading the entire ISO for Windows Server. That particular thing may take those 5 minutes, and then installing it and configuring it, well, it's just way faster to do things from Microsoft Azure. And I'm just going to leave my virtual machine creating. You have already created your virtual machine. It's just starting to provision the resources that it needs, and it will start executing the virtual machine after it finishes provisioning those resources. But you are all set to go. You just have to wait for the virtual machine to finish provisioning and loading. In the next lecture, we're going to actually connect through remote desktop to that virtual machine. Do you want to learn more about Microsoft Azure? Do you want to learn more about cloud computing? Or do you want to learn more about virtual machines, such as adding virtual hard drives to your virtual machines? Maybe you want to learn a little bit more what cloud computing is, or how to create Azure websites, how to create cloud services, or learn a little bit more about virtual machines. Maybe you want to learn how to host databases in the cloud, and of course how to manage all the services with a big variety of management tools. If so, just go to the link below or write that link in your screen on your browser and get my Azure course for only $9. That's a huge discount from $29. So if I were you, I would click on that link right now. In fact, what are you doing here? Go ahead and click that button.